we would love to hear your story, and we thank you for taking the time to tell a portion of your story, whatever the Lord leads you to share. But where would you like to start with your story so that our audience can get to know you better and hear the powerful testimony that you have?
Well, I guess one way to start off is I am an immigrant. I came to America in 1991 with two little kids. My son was only a week old, and my daughter was a year and a half old. And I actually born in India and grew up in a Latin country in Costa Rica. That's where my father from. We left India when I was 5 years old, and we immigrated to Costa Rica. And of course, I don't know, I'd share a little bit about my story. If I think about looking back on my past, I will find myself, or anybody who has not surrendered to Christ or have given their life to Christ will, seeing things the way I see it. I think one of the ways that I see is that, even though as these horrendous things that can happen to our lives, we know that God has never leave us or forsake us. And sometimes we feel like, why God, you allow this to happen to me? But we need to understand that God is not the author of the things that happens to us. We know who is the one behind everything, But so I came to Costa Rica when I was 5 years old, and living in India, we were living in a village. It was very poor. We live in a very, very poor area. And so when my mother decided to leave to India to move to Costa Rica, because my mother have found someone who was added her race. So she was dishonored from her family. So she decided to move to where the father of, the father of her children was, and that was Costa Rica. That's where my dad is from. And when we moved to Costa Rica, of course, in my mind, I'm 5 years old and looking for, the better life for myself and for my little brother and my mother, but things were not went the way I want. I find myself to be, sexually, physically, and mentally abused complete into the age I was 16. That's why my book is called 3 Times Sold, because it was 3 times that I was sold into human trafficking. And that's why I had the passion so much about, do the awareness and rescue, because I believe that just like me, they even though I feel in one point in my life that, maybe, all these things that happens to me was because, sometimes we can think that things happens to us is because God allowed, like I said, but we realize that God is not the author of those things that happens to us. In the middle of all this, I find myself in the place where I find that, God would never leave me or forsake me. And I knew he has a purpose in my life. I just didn't know how that was going to play out. And so my mother saw me when I was 9 years old. And then I was able to escape because she had dropped me in a brothel right next to a bar. And I was able to step out and leave. And, I'm only 9 years old, little girl crying because I want my mom. and I thought in my mind that she had left me in that house and she was going to come back with a toy for me. But it was not a toy. It was just a grown man who has paid for my service. And but then I escaped and I went back home. And during that time, my mother, before I even, she saw me for first time, she brought a guy into my house and pretend that was my half brother, which really it was my mother's lover that she has brought into the house. It was, I grew up in a really, really, really dysfunctional family. My father was an alcoholic. Yeah, my mother was an alcoholic. The man who was living in that house, you know, living with my mother, and my father knew everything and he never did anything about it. And the way he would co-pay his pain was drinking, and chase my mother with machetes. And here we are trying to tell him not to kill my mother. And I mean, it was just very horrible, you know, lifestyle. And another thing my mother was, she used to do, she was a, do a lot of witchcraft in the house. And we understand that there, as innocent things can be, sometimes we allow our children to bring that toys home or things like that, games. But when we open the doors for that stuff to come to our house, the devil just have a party. And that's exactly what he did. The devil was up to destroy every single family in my household, including myself. So, so I, during that time, this man was, abusing me, sexually abusing me. And nevertheless, the way my parents used to, hurt us, it was so hard, beat us until we was bleeding. My father pulled every single nail of my fingers, leave us in a room for the weekend, not food. I mean, tie me from the ceiling, from my hair for hours. I mean, that was one way that he was saying that, we deserve these things, many times. And I wrote it in my book. I mean, you can tell your story in 45 minutes or half an hour, that's why it's important to read the book, because you find out the devil was ready to destroy me, but you find in my story that God was always there, just rescue me, and just told me that he loves me, even though I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
So at the age of almost 13 years old, but the more important thing that happens in my life, even though I suffered through it, when I came to Christ, I was only 12 years old. I remember, I want to talk about this, where, how important is this, those cellulas or church homes, sometimes, we think church is just a building, but really church is any place. We can do church in our own home. I got saved in home, in someone else's home. And it was the most beautiful thing that I discovered in my life, because they showed me so much love. Sometimes we, and the one things I say to people, sometimes we go to churches and we go to these beautiful buildings, and it's just great thing, but don't realize that, what, that ministry is outside, is right before you even enter to the building. You can have the best pastor preaching up there, but if you don't feel love in that entrance door, you're already sitting there and saying, I'm not coming back here. But when they welcome you with that love, you sitting there and you're already in your mind say, I love these people, I love this place, they really treat me the way, they treat me nice, and they accept me the way I am. Yeah. See, if these people in that church, in that home church that I went, they wouldn't embrace me and show me love, I maybe would never came back, never knew about Jesus, and would never even know what really love was until I went to that place.
How did you find that home church? Were you walking by? Was this one of the times when you escaped?
No, actually, so I escaped right after I was sold for first time. I went back home, and during that time, my mother asked me one of those times to go to get something from the store, and I crossed the store back home. It was not, of course, I'm sure it's not like the United States. It was a place when you have, it's like a grocery store, but like a convenience store, but it has like a huge, like a counter, and you go in there, you step in the counter, and you told the guy, can I get the pound of rice? Can I get a pound of beans? And he puts everything in the counter, and you pay, you put it in the bag, and you just go out, go back home. So as I'm choosing the things that I want to buy, I heard the tambling. I actually have one in here.
Yeah.
And I heard it, and that's like, oh, that sounds nice. I want to see what that is. So I left the convenience store walking, and as I walk into their house, I hear them more like loud. And of course, I walk in there. I find, it was a family. It was the pastor and a few other people. It was really small congregation, right? But God was all over. I mean, the anointing was all over, and I didn't understand any of this.
Mhm.
Until now, in my grown up age, I realized, like, wow, that was so beautiful, and I thank God for that house. They opened the doors for me.
Yes.
So I went in the house and they welcomed me. They said, come on, and then after, they had the service. And of course, the pastor, asked me, if anybody wanted, come to Christ. And I didn't understand anything, but I just raised my hands. I said, I want it, I want it, I want it. And I came to Christ. I received Lord as my Savior. And then I start going to the house. Like, I'm still going to church. But you know what? The beautiful thing about this, and I don't get to share much in a conference because it's just the sake of time, but I want to share this because actually this Zoom call is for, talking about the house church. So I start going every Tuesday to the house. We have service. And then people used to come and people used to get saved. And then so we used to, at the end of the service, we used to have coffee and cookies. And it was just like, feel like it was family. Like, it was not like, oh, everybody goodbye and everybody goes in their own business. It became a family. And then Saturdays we used to do fasting, and it was, so one lady used to cook and the other, and we used to share like different homes. I mean, it was just a beautiful thing. So I grateful about that, and I'm grateful that, I'm glad that you're doing that. That's just amazing because you don't hear that much anymore, the
Yeah.
people doing home churches.
Yeah, we believe that the church is going to come out of the buildings because it's not as effective as just the way you put it. It was like a family. So we're finding that the Lord wants to build that kind of we call it ecclesia, because there's a whole backstory as to where even the word church came from that I'd like to share with you sometime. But yeah, it's a much simpler form to worship the Lord instead of this big cathedral where people are sitting in the pews and the pastor and teachers are doing all the work. The Lord wants the whole family to do the work.
That's so beautiful. And you know what? And that's exactly what I mean. That's how God wants us to, we are brothers and sisters. We are a family. And that is, and that's something sometimes we can miss out in churches. You only see them once a week. You never see them
Mhm.
again. And then, it just not, it's not as so personal like these home
Mhm.
churches,
Yeah.
right? Because I know I experienced that. And by the time I left Costa Rica, the church has grown so much, but so instead of doing the building, the brother and sister who was doing that, they just built something in the back of the house, and they just to
Mhm.
bring people. It was just a beautiful thing.
How long
So,
did
but
you
I'm gonna, yeah.
how long did you stay involved with that home church?
Well, until I got sold for second time.
Oh, good.
So even though, I was serving God, even though I was going to church, even though I became very, you know, close to the Lord, the devil's still real,
Mm.
right? And he's still using people. To why? Why? Because he came to what? Kill, to lie, and destroy. And that's his job, and he does the best. And so my mother took me second time to the city, and she asked me, I want for you to come to the city. I want for you to be a babysitter. Even though I was so connected to the people in a home church, I still I was still very broken. And in our mind, if I leave this house, it's going to be something better for my life. And I left because even though I was still serving God, the abuse is still there. You know, sometimes we had this myth and belief that, you know what, you're serving God, everything is going to go well. And we know that that's not true. You know, we know that even though we serve God, things are going to come to our place. It's just how we're going to deal with those things when it comes to our place. So my mother take me to second time. We're going to the city, and I find myself sold for second time. And there I was left in there for 3 years in a brothel. You know, it was no way out. I was living with two other girls, barely not eating much, having a lot of customers in the day, you know. Um, and that time, you know, even though you know, many times you know, they were using drugs because, you know, I believe, and we know it's a fact that a lot of times when we dealing with a lot of pain, we copay these things with different things, right? And they were doing drugs. They were asking me, you know, I was the younger one in there, and they were asking me, Sioni, you know, just use drugs, and I complete refused to do it. Not because I was better than them, it was because what I had experienced in that home church, I had experienced the love that I knew it, that nothing was going to take away from me. And I refused to do, and I used to tell the ladies, the two girls, and then I said, listen, God's gonna take us this place. He has a plans for our life. And they used to think I was crazy, like, you kidding me? Look at where we are. And you know, if I think about it, you know, they were kind of right. I mean, we are sold, we are merchandise, we've been used. But see, what I have, we got, it was very different what they have. They never experienced that. So I was able to escape again. I don't know. I find myself escape, but it's because God knew what was going to happen to me. You know, Jeremiah 29:11 say, you know, I love it. I love it because, you know, he has a purpose. He wants to do the right thing and the best thing for us. So I went back home. I escaped. How I escaped? Well, I have so we barely eat anything in that place, so we pretty much starve. So I have make a soup with ramen noodles, and the house got on fire. So of course, when you see fire, everybody's running everywhere, and of course I ran through the window. I jumped out of the window at 3 stores home. And when I got in the floor, the first thing I just gonna run. So I ran, and I got in the bus, and God sent me someone in there, because of course I had no money to pay the bus. You know, you don't have money in that place. And this lady saw me that I was completely like distressed, and she said, don't worry about it, I'll pay you the trip to your house. And I get back home, and I told my mother I'm back home after I had gone for 3 years. You know, her reaction was very upset. She didn't want me back, of course. So shortly after, she saw me for the third time, and she saw me with a man from America. The man, she saw me for, she actually exchanged me for a cow and some change. So the man, so he came to America, and I stayed in Costa Rica for 4 years before I could come to America, waiting for my green card. And during that time, she figured out that, you know what, if I take you somewhere, you're going to escape again. So she brought the brothel to her house. So the clients was coming to my house, and that's how, you know, she used to make the money. And during that time, by the age I was almost 16, actually at the age of 16, I had 3 abortions was done to me. Not that I was my own choice. It was done because, you know, I just got pregnant. And so I got pregnant from my daughter, almost 18. And you know, and of course she wants me to abort that child. And that time, the man who has purchased me for the third time was here in America. So I refused to born my child, and I kept my daughter, because that time I'm already a little bit older to make that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept my daughter. And then 2 years later, I got pregnant on my son. Year and a half, 2 years. And then again, she wanted me abort my son. She tried, she put so much stuff in my body and it didn't happen. And so that's how I had 2 kids. And then 1991, I had the appointment to come to America, and I came to America, and again, thinking this, the best thing is going to happen to my life. I remember turning around and looking back, and I say, I'm never going to come back to this country. This country is nothing. I find nothing but pain. Mm-hmm. And just like, I was just so like done with the country. Mm-hmm. So I came to America in 1991. With the man who purchased me for third time. And shortly after, 6 months in America, he left me. So I find myself in America with the 6 months old baby. And my daughter was at Taro. She was younger too. No English, complete strange country. So what I do? What did I do? I did what I knew what to do. I started prostituting myself. In that time, I didn't know that I could get, any kind of, service from anybody. I just didn't know. Nobody told me. I didn't speak English. I didn't know what to do. So I prostitute myself. That's what I did all my life anyway. So I let, okay, so then I started doing that, and the man, my husband, in that time, then I got married with him here in America. So then he started coming back to my house, and allow him to do that. And I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made, because then he started complete physically abusing me and mental abuse me. Complete devastated. He hurt me so many times. I became the punching bag. But you know what? In my mind, it was okay. In my mind, I deserved that, because see, that's all I knew. I knew nothing by that. It was okay for the man to hit the woman. It was okay for him to, slap me, break my teeth, and punching me, and cut me multiple times. Until one day I got the opportunity to meet a woman, visit a church. And, of course, a lot of times, when the woman, or even the men, nowadays, we just say women because we are more the ones who can get hurt. But I was going to church. I got bruises, a lot of bruises in my body. And she was questioning me. And of course, because sometimes we want to put that mask that, we think a Christian's supposed to have the light together. And I never wanted to tell anybody, the man who was leaving, he was abusing me physically. So she was asking me, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, everything is fine. I'm just full. I'm this and that and that. And to one day I couldn't take it anymore, because then he started abusing my children. And I just said, you know what, you can abuse me as much you want, but I'm not going to allow to abuse my children, because something in my mind, it was telling me they're not going to go through what I went through growing up. I'm not going to allow him to abuse my children. So I told the woman in the church, I said, my husband is physically abusing me. And she told me, you know what, Sioni, God doesn't want us to be a doormat, and it's not right for what you're going through. So I left him. I finally chose to left him and move on in my life. And I raised my children by myself until one day, I heard a phone call in 2003. I have not gone to Costa Rica. Remember, when I left that country, I said, I'm never going to go back. Mm-hmm. See, sometimes we say one thing, but God say something else, right? And I just love him. I just love God so much, because you know what? He has such a funny way to do things, right? And he always does everything perfect. In 2003, I heard the phone call. I heard the phone ring. I pick up. I was cooking a meal for my children when it was my brother, the man who have heard from over 20 years. His voice, he says, Sioni, I want for you to come to Costa Rica. Mommy is dying. My mother is dying. In my mind, I had chose to forget that woman. But see, I had never faced her. I thought, sometimes we think, oh, I had chose to forget that person until you really encounter with that person. You realize like, maybe I never forget her. So I flew out to Costa Rica. I remember the phone call was Wednesday. I got to Costa Rica on Friday afternoon. Everybody was waiting in the hospital because my mother was in life support. They were actually waiting for me to say goodbye, to take her life support, and for her to, to go whatever, I'm not sure about her salvation in that time. It was questionable. I wasn't living with her, so I don't know really her lifestyle. So I got to Costa Rica. I got to the hospital. They brought me to the floor where she was in incubate. I mean, not incubate, but with the life support. And I remember walking to the room and I could not believe that was my mother. So she has had 4 heart attacks in 48 hours. And I remember walking to the bed and not be able to even like see her because she looks so different. She was swollen. She has holes everywhere. And I remember the first thing I got to the bed, I grabbed her hands and I say, Mom, I just want to tell you that I have chose to forgive you many, many years ago. And when I say that, something happens. She started jumping out of that bed. I mean, it was so scary. Like I was like I was like, this is something crazy. This is weird. But the more she jumps out, the more like something on me, it was just like boldness. Grab her hands and say, Mommy, I want for you to understand that I have forgive you. I say, I chose to forgive you because Christ has forgiven me. And I promise you, Mom, that my children need you in their lives. I need you. I want to see you walking out of this hospital. And I remember the doctor and the nurse, they all jumped out into the room and wonder why this woman reacting. I mean, she's in the border dead, right, kind of thing. And the more they see me screaming to her and like telling her that I forgive her, the doctor would say, keep talking to her. She's coming back. So just to make the story short, I stayed with her for 1 month because those hospitals, they're not like in America hospitals that you got your own nurse and everybody's taking care of you. You pretty much take care yourself. And if you don't have someone taking care of you, you have to do everything in your own. And of course, the way that she was, she couldn't do anything for herself. So every day I used to go and grab her hands and say, Mom, if you can hear me, can you squish my finger? And she was like, and it was like life on her, like life came back to her. And 8 days later, they take her life support. She was able to breathe in her own. And a month later, I was able to walk her out of the hospital. And that was a testimony right there, because she said to me, when I took her out of the hospital, I brought her home before I came back to America. She said to me, Sioni, I was in this hole, this dark hole, and I saw you grabbing your hands and pulling me out. So it was just an amazing thing. And you know what the amazing thing was? During that time when it was a priest, because I don't know in America, I know in Costa Rica, when people are in deathbed, the priest comes and they do I don't know what they do exactly. I never know because I wasn't sure about it, but I know that God that I have confessed my sins when I was 12, he was alive and he can do a miracle in her life. So I remember when the priest came, I said, no, leave this room. You don't understand. My mother needs salvation. That's what she needs. She needs salvation. And I remember he left. I never saw him again. But I was able to take my mother, and yes, my mother came to Christ before she died.
Amen.
And my father came to Christ too. And that was the power about forgiveness, you know.
Yes.
I
Wow. You've been through so much and you've suffered so much as a little girl, having your fingernails pulled out and being hung up by your hair, and then having to be sold for 3 times and for years at a time. My goodness, how? And you mentioned hearing the voice of the Lord in the midst of that. Can you help us to understand how you had the strength to go through so much?
Well, you know how the book of Esther is, right?
Mhm.
The book of Esther, God is not mentioned once, but his fingerprints is all over the book. And
Yes.
that's how exactly was God in my life.
Mhm.
How was to be knowing that, you know what, maybe thinking, you know what, that God really is real. Yes, he is real. That I saw back then that he has a purpose in my life. Not quite sure, because I couldn't see everything the way I see it now. But
Mhm.
I know that deep inside, he was by my side the whole time. He never allowed the enemy to destroy me. See, the enemy could destroy me, but God didn't allow. So
Mm.
that's why I always say, you know what, devil, you should have killed me when you had the opportunity, because now forget about it. I'm going to tell everybody about what God is done in my life. And if God did it for me, he can do it for anybody. He really can do it for anybody. He is that God that we serve. He's
Amen.
a loving God. He is not to hurt anybody. And even in those midst of hard things that I went through in life, I know the experience that I have when I was 12 years old.
Mhm.
That was not, nobody can take that away from me.
Amen. Wow, that is an amazing story, Sioni, and I'm so glad that you've taken the time to share it with us. And now you have a ministry, and you're involved in many ministries that you've mentioned, and you're sharing this story. I guess more and more you're going out, you have your books and they tell the story, but you're also speaking, and your ministry is growing. So, and I'm sure there's people who will hear this who want to give to you. So what is the best way to give to your ministry so that it can prosper even more?
Well, they can write a check to Rodriguez Survivor Ministry. That's the
Mhm.
name of my ministry, Rodriguez Survivor Ministry.
Mhm.
They can write me a check. I do have an account, the ministry account. I don't have it with me, but but you know, they can purchase the book. You know, any ways they want to help is fine. You know, I receive anything.
Yeah, I'll put in the description of the video, I'll put your website on the description, so they'll be able to click on the video and find your website and give to you that way. I'm sure there's descriptions there on how to do that. One other thing I wanted to talk about is that people don't understand, and they look at prostitutes like they're people who've made choices to live that kind of a lifestyle. And they don't realize that the average prostitute starts at 13 years old. You were prostituted earlier than that. So prostitutes are basically victims of human trafficking. So how would you like to explain that more so people can understand that?
So absolutely, and a lot of women who are in prison, they're being charged for prostitution because the system doesn't understand that.
Mhm.
They're prostitutions. They're women who has been, they don't realize that a lot of women, you know, not all the women, some women chose to be prostitute because they're so broken inside that they don't know really, they're looking for something to fulfill that. And into Christ come to your life, because Christ is the only one can fulfill the emptiness in your life. Really, is no man, no money, no nothing. Christ is the one.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
they looking to fulfill something that is being hurt. But a lot of women who has been prostitute, they have been some kind they abuse at young age, and they co-pay with that, whether looking for making money or to trying to find their acceptance through men's or to whatever. A lot of women get prostitute, like you say, is because the young age, a lot of times you being taken, see, and it happens in the prisons. I have a lot of clients, they have been prostitutes taken in prison and be locked out for something that they really didn't do. They've been forced to go to the streets to make money, to bring money to the person whoever prostituted them, and then they get arrested, putting in prison, and now they're getting charged for a prostitution, something that they didn't put themselves from the beginning. It was put them on them.
Yes. Well, thank you for helping to clarify that. And hopefully people will look at, when they see a prostitute, if they're driving down a road in that district in a certain city, and they see that, they'll maybe have more compassion on women who are stuck in that situation. Your daughter, her ministry is affiliated to yours. How did you and your daughter come to be in ministry together? How did that work out?
We ministry in the prisons together.
Mm-hmm.
Because my daughter's story is in the prisons. That's why I have so much passion, because my daughter went to prison. She was facing 14 years of in prison, but for the miracle God, it was just like God was all over. And she didn't have to, the charges was dropping. She didn't have to really do all those years. She only ended doing 6 months. She has a lot of passion for the Lord. And I remember when she was in prison, I used to write her letters, used to, telling about God. And she said, you know what, your God is not working for me. Your God is, he has me in this place. And no, I used to tell her, no, God didn't put you in that place. You put yourself in there for your choices, your choices that you make. See, one thing is, a lot of time when you've been putting in there for someone else's choice, but when you go in there for your own choices. And I used to tell her that. And so she came out of the prison, and she's on fire for the Lord. And her and I, we've been doing ministry for many, many years. She's been out of the prison for 10 years. Happy Mary, a great mother. She has a master's degree in science and theology. She loves the Lord. And so she went to school to be able to tell people, no, God is real. This is real. This is a real God, So she started the theology of God. And so now that's what she does. She ministered with me. A lot of times we go and speak, in places like the place that I met you and things like that.
Yeah, well, that's so awesome. I hope to someday have a separate interview with your daughter and talk about what the Lord is doing through her life, hear her testimony, and hear about her ministry. But Sioni, thank you so much. I know you've been working all day and you came home and you had to do an interview. It's probably not the first thing you wanted to do with your time after a busy day. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. I love talk about God. I can never stop talking about him, and I'm never too tired about telling people the goodness of him.
Amen.
And I love that. And yes, I would love for you to have my daughter. She is amazing, and she loves the Lord too.
Amen. Well, we'll be sure to get the word out as far as where your books can be found and your website, so that more people can hear your story, and that they can also support your ministry and what the Lord is doing. So, Sioni, thank you very much. God bless you and all that you're doing.
Oh, God bless you too. Bye-bye, everyone.